Good morning, and welcome to week two of your graduate level MBA class, Organizational Behavior. Hope you enjoyed your first week and felt like it was productive and enlightening on a few levels. Um, I apologize up front. I'm looking a little bit more casual today. I usually try to have a little more professional look, but I did want to show you we got some new Newman University School of Business swag in this week, and I'm wearing my Newman University School of Business sweatshirt. So, if any of you have any interest in any shirts or sweatshirts or anything like that, they come from dress shirts to golf shirts to anything like that. Check with me, and I'll get you connected with Denise Cooley and get you fixed up with some of that if you have any interest. Um, anyway, so first off this week, I wanted to got a couple of chapters we're going to go through. And when I go through the PowerPoints, I pick out about the top 10 or 12 out of our PowerPoint deck and just kind of highlight those, and we'll kind of go through those today. But before we start that, I wanted to share the screen, and I want to show you a couple of the videos that I've got picked out for you to look at this week. So let me find those real quick. All right, here we go. Okay, so we got three videos that I wanted to highlight this week, and the first two have to deal with an organizational model called Holacracy. And it's, I think, fairly new, probably been in practice for sure less than 20 years and possibly even less than 10 or 15. The first video I have for you is a TED talk that the gentleman who's kind of got the consulting company, and I think he possibly even developed the concept, talks in pretty good detail about what Holacracy is. And then the second video I've got for you this week is on Zappos. Some of you may have heard it. They're a shoe company, and they were recently sold to Amazon. And so they practice the actual organizational model Holacracy. So it's a really interesting video, pretty easy. I think 6-7 minutes, something like that. So hope you'll look at both of those videos. It kind of shows you maybe not the here and now of organizations and organizational behavior, but I think it shows you where things definitely could go in the future. And so as we're looking at organizations, we really need to keep our eyes peeled on the directions they're going to be going in the coming decades. And I think this is maybe not, it might be a little bit out there. This might be a little far on the scale in terms of what many businesses will feel comfortable with. But I would encourage you to think of it like the Paris Fashion Show. You usually don't see all the stuff up and down the runways actually in stores or in practice. People wearing them on the streets necessarily, but they do influence the designs that people do wind up wearing. And same thing with the car shows. So I do think that Holacracy, some of the elements of that are definitely going to be put in place, and they're going to be very popular and already are very popular moving forward. And I think as we get the millennials and the Gen X's and the different generations to follow in our companies, I think we're going to have to be looking at at least some of the components of Holacracy, if not in its entirety. So hope you enjoy both those videos and find those worthwhile. The last video that I've got is on a really big story this last week. Purdue Pharma had basically a really bad week last week. If you've been following this story and the Sackler family, they are kind of, if not ground zero, pretty close to it in terms of this opioid crisis. And the Justice Department basically handed down a fine of $8 billion, which is probably double the worth of the company, which means it's basically taking the entire company. There's no way they could probably repay that. And it's basically a death sentence for the company. It's going to be reformed in terms of being a government entity of some sort or a government controlled company. The Sackler family and all of the investors will be basically pushed out. There will be probably no disbursements of any net worth of that company to any of the investors. And the reason I highlight this is a story of organizational behavior gone totally off the rails and gone bad. This is the worst of the worst behavior that you can get in organizations, and it was dominated by greed, intimidation, corruption, and it is more than the organization. It goes way beyond just the organizations, the drug makers. It went to the wholesalers, it went to the retailers, the pharmacists, the doctors, the Sackler family. This doesn't get them out of the heat. I think now that this is done and the company's basically had a nail driven through its heart, I think you're going to see them go after the family itself and the executives. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised if you don't see criminal charges. And you'll see probably that entire family's wealth potentially wiped out. And you know what? It should be. This is just horrible. This has just left a disaster in its wake. And this is about as bad as I've ever seen it. I mean, even 2008 and some of those things, they're horrible, but this just hits the very heart and soul of communities, of entire regions, states that will deal with this. There will be people that will never get their lives back on track. And even families that have been destroyed in this process. So anyway, the reason I wanted to highlight this again is just this is why organizational behavior is important. This is why organizational structures are important. And we're going to be talking about today some of the things that kind of flow into this as well. Okay, so anyway, I hope you enjoy all three of those videos, and they should be enlightening. Okay, at this time, I'm going to get into chapter 3 a little bit. And again, I'm not going to go through all of the slides, but I encourage and hope that all of you will and read the chapters. This is really, really good stuff. This is stuff that strikes at the heart of organizations and managing organizations. So chapter 3 is on attitudes and job satisfaction. Attitudes are evaluative statements, either favorable or unfavorable concerning objects, people, or events, and it reflects how one feels about something. There's 3 main components of attitude. Cognitive equals evaluation. Example, my supervisor gave a promotion to a coworker who deserved it less than me. So therefore, my evaluation is my supervisor is unfair. An affective or feeling, so therefore I dislike my supervisor. And then behavioral or action. I'm looking for other work. I've complained about my supervisor to anyone who'd listen. So that's the 3 main components of attitude. Major job attitudes, job satisfaction, job involvement, psychological empowerment, organizational commitment, perceived organizational support, and employee engagement. And by and large, especially in the US, we have gotten much, much better on this front, especially if you can compare firms of yesteryear from decades ago, especially if you get 40, 50 years back. It's a much, much different environment. And so we understand the importance of job attitudes. We understand the importance of keeping people engaged and feeling empowered in organizations now. And so by and large, most organizations pay attention to this stuff, and it's a good thing they do. There are many different ways of measuring job satisfaction. We, at our company, We had a yearly evaluation that we did. It was a two-way evaluation. When we did our evaluation of our employees before they, well, at the same time they completed an evaluation on the company itself. And so we had a standardized form, which was pretty comprehensive, and it gave us a pretty good feel, and we could score that by stores or different stores in our complex. We could score it by departments. We could score it by individuals, obviously. And so we tried very, very hard to make sure that this was never punitive, that if we did get negative reviews from our employees on our thing, that we met with them individually, and we tried to do what we could to take actions that would hopefully rectify some of that. And sometimes, maybe just like a regular evaluation, we felt like it was a little fair or unfair, and we would have those discussions as well. So, and maybe at times people didn't understand completely some of the things that we brought to the table or that we could bring to the table. So hopefully, I think most of our employees felt like that was a pretty good process. And then we would do evaluations on them individually as well. So, but at least they had a chance to kind of have some input on the organization itself. We felt like this always kept us moving the needle, and we always felt like it was a really important part of our organizational culture. Here's a slide that illustrates job satisfaction by country. And of these particular countries, you can see that the United States is probably in about the top, if not top third, probably about the top third of the countries that are listed there. One thing that might be a bit of a surprise is that Mexico is at the top. I don't know if that would surprise anybody. Switzerland doesn't really surprise me too much. Norway, Denmark, you see a lot of studies on how those countries and their cultures tend to lead to high life satisfaction in general. But Mexico, I'm going to study up on that a little bit. I found that interesting. Let's see, what causes job satisfaction? Well, that can be the work itself, social component. It can be a part of that. One of the things that I figured out when I did my research on how people weathered convulsive environments, and I did survey instruments and things like that, was how when people lost jobs, how devastating it could be. In my qualitative interviews particularly, I just was taken aback by how devastating it was for people to lose work families. And I can't count the number of times people that describe them as such, work families. And so the social component of job satisfaction is really huge. If people bond and they really, really feel comfortable with their work environments, these do take on almost familial relationships. And so it's interesting to think how much that can impact it. Pay, obviously, is a huge impact. Corporate social responsibility. More and more people are paying attention to what companies and the organizations that they work for, what they're doing for people, for the planet, for the overall good of the cultures and society. Pay, while many studies will show that pay ranks actually down on the scale a little bit, third or fourth of the chief things that people say make for job satisfaction. I think that's a little deceiving, because obviously pay has to be taken care of. If you can't take care of the pay, then really nothing else matters. Childcare, gym memberships, you've got to be able to take care of that pay. So that's just a fundamental thing that everybody still has to pay a lot of attention to, obviously. Impact of job satisfaction can be exit. People leave the organization. Can be voice, includes actively and constructively attempting to improve conditions. Loyalty, passively but optimistically waiting for conditions to improve. And then even neglect, passively allows conditions to worsen. So people get disaffected and they get disillusioned, and sometimes they just kind of lose their tendency to care. And so there's a lot of impacts on an organization if you have severe job dissatisfaction. And again, as much as I talk about organizations, and particularly in the US, have done a better job in this realm, it still never ceases to amaze me how many companies just still don't seem to grab a clue on this. Counterproductive work behavior is deviant behavior in the workplace or simply withdrawal. And this can get not only negative for a company, it can get dangerous for a company in terms of it can threaten the survivability of a company if the person holds a key enough position. So this is why you want to pay attention to these signals so that you don't get people at this level. The benefits of satisfaction, better job and organizational performance. There's numerous studies that show this connection. Better organizational citizenship behaviors, greater levels of customer satisfaction, generally lower absenteeism and turnover, and decreased instances of workplace deviance. And one that I would highlight on this list is the levels of customer satisfaction. If you don't have happy, engaged, and satisfied employees, you're not going to have satisfied and engaged customers in an organization. I think that's been proven time and again. So again, this is why it's worth a company's time and an organization's time to pay attention to all this. So the implications for managers, pay attention to your employees' job satisfaction levels as determinants of their performance, turnover, absenteeism, and withdrawal behaviors. Measure employee job attitudes objectively. To raise employee satisfaction, evaluate the fit between employees' work interests and their intrinsic parts of their job. Consider the fact that high pay alone is unlikely to create a satisfying work environment. And that's very true. Okay, now we'll jump over to chapter 4. And this is on emotions and moods. And this ties in rather nicely with the components of job satisfaction. We're going to look at some of the key areas. Well, I'm sorry, let me get this on full screen. We'll differentiate between emotions and moods, identify some of the sources of these emotions and moods, and we'll kind of just take you through, and then we'll look at emotional intelligence as well in terms of the importance of that. The difference between emotions and moods. Emotions are caused by a specific event. They're usually very brief in duration. They're specific and numerous in nature, usually accompanied by distinct facial expressions, and they're action-oriented in nature. So when we get emotional, we tend to demonstrate it, and we tend to associate it with certain types of immediate behaviors. Moods, the cause is often general and unclear. They last longer than emotions. They're more general in nature, generally not indicated by distinct expressions, and they're cognitive in nature. The basic emotions, anger, fear, sadness, happiness, disgust, surprise. And as we deal with more and more folks that have anxiety issues and also depression, these issues, these emotions can get much more difficult to diagnose and much more difficult to understand because we're playing on many, many different levels. So in some cases, managers are put in the unenviable position of almost having to be kind of like a psychologist and diagnose what levels they're working on with certain individuals. Now, larger organizations have in-house resources that can help with that, but most organizations are flat, most organizations are small, and some of us are very ill-equipped to work in this arena. Moral emotions, emotions that have moral implications because of our instant judgment of the situation that evokes them, resulting in moral disgust. One of the things I note here is this is moving to the forefront of organizations via social media, group and shared moral outrage, group judgment and superiority. So it's very easy for us through use of social media to make judgments and to evoke responses. And so this is why moral emotions have to be really paid attention to. So here's kind of the circumplex of all of the emotions and whether they tend to have positive and negative effects. So you can take a look at this at your leisure. Sources of emotions and moods, personality. Some people have different tendencies to be impacted by emotions or moods than others. Time of day can have you've heard the term before, I'm a morning person or I'm an afternoon person. So, people may have different emotional and mood settings based on which time of day it is. Even the day of the week can have a huge impact. You'll notice there are people that seem energized and really excited and ready to attack when they get to Mondays. And you see other people that just feel like they're just dragging and they're just almost depressed because of that time of week. And then you'll generally see people tend to get more upbeat as the week goes on. They call Wednesday hump day, right? That kind of gets people over the hump in terms of their emotions and the way they're looking. Their attitudes can tend to get better. As a manager and a CEO of my company, I always found it easier to deal with difficult discussions and situations on Thursdays or Fridays because people had climbed a lot of that hill for the week. They were definitely a little more upbeat. Their outlook was a little better. I even, when I would work Saturdays, I would tackle some of that stuff even on Saturday mornings if I had access to people, because Saturday mornings were very, very low stress and people had pretty good outlooks and attitudes on Saturday mornings. So the day of the week can certainly make a big difference. Other sources, people say the weather, but according to research, there's really not any discernible impact based on the weather. Now, I think that can change though if you've had, like, for instance, a really long, hard winter, or if it's just 100-degree weather plus for a 2 to 3 week period. That stuff can grind and wear on people. So the duration of weather patterns may change that, but just going from hot to cold and from different normal changes in weather doesn't really show as much impact as people tend to believe. Stress, obviously, lack of sleep increases negative emotions and impairs decision making. Exercise, they correlate with a mildly positive impact. Although, again, with exercise, I do think that differs based on who you're talking to and different people. There are some people that I think exercise has a huge impact on their mental outlook. Age, older people experience negative emotions less frequently. And I would agree with that. Being over 60 now, I think I definitely feel like I have a definite more of a chill than I used to when I was in my 20s and 30s, particularly. Emotional labor, an employee's expression of organizationally desired emotions during interpersonal transactions at work. And I make note here, it can be a lot of work to put on your best face in professional work environments. Emotional dissonance is when an employee has to project one emotion while simultaneously feeling another. And I note here that this is in some ways the definition of professionalism and leadership. The people that are leaders and the people that are professionals, many times this is the difference, is they're able to have that emotional dissonance. No matter what they're feeling inside, whether they're stressed, whether they're scared, whether they're happy, whether they're mad, they're able to keep that professionalism and demonstrate leadership because of it. Affective events theory and emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is a person's ability to perceive emotions in their self and others, understand the meaning of these emotions, regulate one's emotions in a cascading model. So you hear a lot about emotional intelligence, and I definitely adhere to that. I think it's a skill that all of us can and should work on, and we should also encourage in others. And it is something, it's not something you're either born with or you're not. It is something you can work with and improve upon throughout your entire life. Effective events theory, employees react emotionally to things that happen to them at work, and this reaction influences their job performance and satisfaction. And this is very true. There's a direct correlation. Emotion regulation, identifying and modifying the emotions you feel. Effective emotion regulation techniques include acknowledging emotional responses to situations and venting. Being able to overcome our base emotions, or at least temper, even hide them, can make a huge difference in attaining career growth. And I would really emphasize this to all of you. This can be a big difference in your career trajectory, is how you're able to control and temper and overcome your base emotions. When I worked at my company as a CEO, and we had 150 employees, and we had 7 stores, and we had complexity all over the place, and we had huge ups and downs in the ag industry, and particularly the last 3 years before we sold our organization, it was very tumultuous, and it was a stressful and tricky time period. And when I went around to our stores, which I got around too often, and I walked around and talked to all of our employees, which I did when I got to the stores, I had to project confidence. I had to project calm in the face of all of this. And I will guarantee you there were times I didn't feel that way. And so you just have to get very good at masking your base emotions. Now, some would wonder, well, is that lying? Is that disingenuous? Is that deceitful? Well, maybe all of the above in a way. But if you're going to take on the mantle of leading an organization, there's times you've got to do that, because had I let employees know at times how uncertain I was about our company's future, and how scared I was about our company's future, it could have resulted in us losing employees, and we could have gone into a downward spiral at any time. Since I was able to project the opposite of that, and calm and confidence and all of that, we kept all of our people throughout and all the way through the sale, and we were able to sell the company successfully, and all of our employees had just as good a jobs, if not better jobs, on the other side with the new company that purchased us. So it does tug at you a little bit. It does make you wonder if you're doing the right things, but that's just part of leadership. You've got to be able to, at times, you got to be able to project confidence when you don't feel so confident. Organizational behavior, applications of emotions and moods, job attitudes. Emotions at work get carried home, but rarely carried in the next day. But that's not necessarily true. Sometimes they do. Deviant workplace behaviors. Those who feel negative emotions are more likely to engage in such behavior. Customer service. Customers catch emotions from employees. It's called emotional contagion. And that's why if you don't have happy, engaged employees and satisfied employees, you're probably not going to have happy, engaged, and satisfied customers over the long haul. Safety and injury at work. Bad moods can contribute to injuries on the job, and at their worst, they can even threaten the safety of employees around them. Implications for managers. Recognize that emotions are a natural part of the workplace, and good management does not mean creating an emotion-free environment. So you're going to have emotions, you're going to have highs, you're going to have lows. It's not about eliminating all of that. It's about managing it and keeping it within some parameters, manageable parameters and productive parameters. To foster creative decision-making, creativity, and motivation in employees, model positive emotions and moods as much as is authentically possible. And again, when I was the CEO and leader of my business, I did that continually. And again, there were times I did battle how authentic it was, because again, I felt scared, but I couldn't show those emotions. I had to show something entirely different. But we have to find our balance. And I felt like I did find a balance, and I felt like I could shave my face, and I felt like I could sleep at night because I felt like I was able to identify an appropriate balance. provide positive feedback to increase the positivity of employees. Of course, it also helps to hire people who are predisposed to positive moods. Within our organization, we had a 90-day probationary period, and we would watch people and we watch them interact, and we'd watch their attitudes, their moods, their behaviors. And if we didn't feel like it was going to be a positive impact on our organization, they probably weren't going to survive their 90-day probationary period. And if people get on the other side of it, or they get on the downhill side of this thing, and they're just not a positive influence on your business, I suggest you coach for change or eliminate those who cannot change. Because if you get negative people in your organization and you tolerate that behavior and you don't get it contained and you don't get it turned, then that can catch fire and that can spread through your organization. That's something you just cannot take a chance on. Now, I'm not talking about cutting and running at the first sign of problems. I'm just talking about you coach people and you have those discussions. You have serious and you have challenging discussions. You let them know what's at stake. You let them know what's on the line. And you know what? Sometimes it's not a good fit. I've told people before, not very often, luckily, but I've had discussions where I just told people, we're obviously not a great fit for you. And so I would give them 2 or 3 paid days off to go and find the organization that was a better fit for them. And you know what? Sometimes they'd come back from that 2 or 3 days and they'd figure out that we didn't look so bad after all. And they started looking around, they started looking at other organizations. And it wasn't unusual for us to have people that left our employ and after 6 to 12 months want to come back and get reemployed with our company because they figured out the grass wasn't quite as green on the other side as they thought. And a number of times we were able to get them back involved with our business successfully, and sometimes we chose not to do that. So anyway, that is the slides for this week, and I just wanted to kind of go through those with you. I hope you enjoy the videos. I hope you're enjoying the class so far. I've really enjoyed, I appreciate everybody doing such a good job introducing themselves to myself and your classmates. I've really enjoyed your first week posts. In general, I've got to say I've been very impressed with the posts and your writing skills, and people are taking them seriously, and I hope you continue to do that. This is an incredibly important class, and this is where the rubber meets the road, and you got to understand the stuff. I encourage you to read the textbook, go through the PowerPoints, really dig into this stuff, it's good subject matter, and I think you'll enjoy it all the way through. I'll try to do what I can to keep it as engaging as possible for everybody. So that's it for week 2. I hope you all have a great and a safe week. So far, so good with Newman. We're keeping the numbers in check and in pretty good shape so far, and we're coming into our 10th week for the overall semester. That's the second week for our 8-week class we're in, but we're well over halfway through the semester in the regular cycle, and so we're pretty pleased with the progress so far and keeping everybody pretty healthy, and hopefully going to be able to keep the campus open and engaged on campus throughout the duration. Well, anyway, if I can help anybody with anything, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll look forward to talking to you again next week. Thank you, and we'll